As I've mentioned before, there are a lot of things that Degrassi could have done to explore the characters more. I've already made a video about this topic, but there were so many other things that I didn't really get to talk about, and there are so many other things that the show never really followed up on that I think could have been plot lines to help add some depth to certain characters. I think a lot of these plot lines could have led to interesting conflicts for the characters, but it never really went that way. There were some things that I definitely wanted to see more than others, so I thought it would be fun to revisit this topic and look back at some plot lines and things that never really got to flourish. One of the biggest missed opportunities of the show were certain friendships that were established, that I honestly thought could have been interesting to see more of. I don't know why, but I'm a fan of friendship storylines, especially when both of them are outcasts and they form a deeper friendship over time. Even though it's nothing deep, I still think that by showing Imogen and Bianca being friends, we could have also seen Bianca learning new things about having a deep friendship with someone that she's never really experienced before. We could have also had a chance to see different sides from both of them, since they have different personalities. What we've come to learn about Bianca is that she doesn't like to get too close to anyone, and that she has a tougher exterior that makes her intimidating to other girls. Imogen is seen as weird by most, and she's just someone who wants a friend. I think the dynamic between them could have been interesting to develop over time. After that one episode with them, they kind of backtrack on this friendship because they were developing Fiona and Imogen's relationship, and they probably didn't have a way to fit their friendship into the storyline. Bianca also ends up getting back together with Drew, and her conflicts get wrapped up in his at times. By season 12, Bianca still didn't really have a close friend. At least that's how it felt to me. We'd see her talk to Fiona at certain times, but nothing deep, and she's casually hanging out with Fiona and Imogen, but mainly because Drew has moved in with Fiona. It's one of the friendships on the show that I could have seen becoming more deep and meaningful. Craig and Sean's friendship was also one that I was interested in. The writers seemed to understand why Sean and Craig would get along too, since they'd established Sean having a distant relationship with his parents. It makes sense that Sean would be able to relate to Craig when he finds out that Craig is getting abused by his father. Craig also notices that something is up with Sean when he goes to Jimmy's party. There were moments between the two as friends that showed that they really understood each other, so it also disappointed me that they never became close friends. I know over time they had Craig join Spinner and his friend group, and Sean ended up getting involved with Jay, so naturally they drifted apart. But when you watch the show back, it is interesting to see how the writers clearly thought these characters had similar enough experiences where there could have been a nice friendship between them. Imagine if we got to see Craig and Sean interact after everything with the shooting, or everything that went on with Craig and his mental health issues. It's just disappointing. Now, Jane and Mia's friendship is one that I'm also very interested in, and it might be the one that I wish that we got to see more of the most because of the complicated history between them.
Sound like anyone you know? You dropped our friendship the minute that I got pregnant, remember? Look, he's gonna let you down, Mia. It's what he does.
From what we know, Mia and Jane were friends back in middle school before Mia got pregnant, and because Mia was dating Lucas, Jane probably wasn't the biggest fan of this, and it probably naturally created a rift between them. And once Mia got pregnant, Jane probably didn't know how to handle her 14-year-old brother getting her 13-year-old friend pregnant, so she started to avoid Mia. Jane was young and didn't really think. When you're at that age, you just want to fit in with everyone. Hell, many adults care about this. I don't even know what I would do in Jane's position either, and this is exactly why I find their dynamic and history particularly interesting. It's not like they just fought and then stopped being friends. Mia ended up having a baby that she had to take care of and raise, and her close friend left her around that time. Imagine being Mia in a position like this too, having to be judged by people, and you don't even have your friend to stick by you. It makes sense why Jane would be scared. I don't blame her for acting like that, but I imagine Mia was really hurt that she lost her friend. When Jane and Mia reunite later, we do see that there is still some anger on Mia's part, which is understandable. We also see that Jane cares for Mia because she encourages her to stay away from Lucas. Instead of avoiding Mia like she did in the past, she decides to try to help her because she knows how her brother is. Even though Jane and Mia aren't on the best terms, Jane does try to warn Mia about her father and Isabella getting too close with him. I know it was from a one-off horror special, but I really wish the writers actually went through with this line here.
I really missed you as a friend, too. I promise when we get out of here, it won't make up for lost time, okay?
I think it could have been interesting to see how Mia would have supported Jane through everything with her father and see them rekindling their friendship. I think seeing Mia expressing to Jane how hurt she was and also getting to hear from Jane about how she was feeling would have been so interesting of a plot line for the characters. While we're on the subject of Jane and Mia, let's also talk about Lucas, because I think he had a lot of potential to be redeemed to the audience. After learning that his father abused Jane, we do see a glimpse of Lucas's vulnerability, and I think it would have been interesting to focus on or at least show more more of Lucas being involved in Bella's life. It was still before Nina Dobrev left the show, so it could have been interesting to show some more of that, even if it was only a little through Mia or Jane's storylines. I think there was some more we could have seen from Lucas before he left the show. He was mostly there for either Mia or Jane's plot lines, but maybe we could have seen Lucas picking up Isabella from Peter's loft, or Isabella excited to see Lucas, implying that he's attempting to have a better relationship with his daughter. Since he was mainly used narratively for other characters' storylines, I think there was still a way they could show some subtle progression on Lucas's end. The writers probably felt that since Jane and Mia's storylines no longer needed him, his character didn't really need to be in the show anymore. I think when done right, Degrassi can make me invested in side characters that weren't ever meant to be main characters. It would have been interesting to see how Lucas felt about Mia moving Isabella to France. Even if it was in a scene during one of Jane's plotlines, maybe he could have mentioned how he's trying to fight for custody, or we find out that Mia ultimately got full custody. I don't know, I just think that Lucas had the potential for growth, or there were moments that made me sympathize with him to a certain degree. I at least wish we knew what his relationship with Bella would be like since Mia moved out of the country, but I might be in the minority on this one. As we know, over time, characters that started out having more focus slowly became less focused on. Toby is one of the characters I think first because he was on since season 1 and had plot lines more frequently in the first 4 seasons. It felt after a certain point they didn't take Toby seriously as a character, mostly being in the background or delivering information to advance someone else's storyline. There were aspects that they established about Toby that made him stand out, as I've already talked about briefly before. Degrassi depicting what happens when a young boy has insecurities about his body is interesting, but unfortunately it was never followed up on again. And that is one of Degrassi's biggest flaws when it comes to storylines, and when it comes to a lot of the characters, especially the ones that they don't really favor. Another storyline I found interesting about Toby was his father and mother's very toxic way of communicating in front of their son.
This is Parents' Day. You're the parent.
We're both the parents here, and we'll discuss it later, okay?
We will discuss it now. Why aren't you helping Toby get his work in on time? Maybe we need to reassess Toby's living arrangements.
Don't threaten me. And breaking commitments is yours? That's why Toby lives with me.
This obviously brings a lot of stress to Toby. For me, it was an interesting storyline, learning more about his relationship to his mother. He doesn't really spend much time with her, and he's always worried about his parents being in the same room together because they fight so much.
She didn't even tell me. You know, that is so typical of your mother. She just wants...
See? You guys can't be in the same room without freaking out. Stop blaming each other and then using me as another excuse to argue.
We never saw his mother after that one episode, so this could be used narratively to expand on why Toby's relationship with his mother is distant. After season 1, his mother would continue to be distant with Toby, maybe. After seeing how little his mother calls him or checks in. By season 3, maybe he's given up on his mother being involved at all. His father would probably continue to talk bad about her in front of Toby, and this would start to make Toby actually think worse of her. By season 4, after the shooting, Toby lost someone he thought was a friend, and would naturally be angry, hurt, and traumatized. After hearing about the shooting, Toby's mother realizes how little she's actually been involved, and how she didn't make an effort. His mother would come back because he went through such a traumatic event. This is where we would really see Toby's anger and resentment towards his mother come to the forefront. Maybe he thinks that she doesn't actually care about being back, but she only cares because the shooting happened, and she feels guilty for being away. Honestly, I think that they should have focused on Toby a little bit more emotionally after the shooting happened anyway. So they could have also tried to work in this conflict with his mother, especially after such a significant event would be interesting, because we could get a chance to see more of Toby's deeper anger that he doesn't really express as much, showing us a different side to the character. Imogen is a character that isn't too highly received by fans, but I think there is a lot about her that I find relatable and interesting at times. I think as Imogen's character went on, they didn't really give her as many interesting plot lines, mostly involved in love triangles and relationship drama, but Imogen's potential to be a better written character was there in a few ways. One plotline that stood out to me with Imogen was during season 12, which I think was one of the best episodes of the season, when she learns that her father has early onset dementia. It's one of the rare times where we really get to focus on Imogen as a character. Most of her plotlines have been centered around Eli or her developing relationship with Fiona, that we really haven't had a chance to learn anything more about her home life or her relationships relationship to her parents. This is also a good moment to start showing us who Imogen is outside of relationships. She's someone that, although is an oddball herself, is also insecure when it comes to how others view her father. At first she thinks her father is just acting weird like he always does, but his behavior becomes more forgetful. During all this, Imogen is also working on the school play as a set designer, and she needs a bit of money to fund it, so she decides to call her mom and ask her for money. We see how she dresses differently and acts like she wants to see her mother, but she resents her for leaving her and her father. We hadn't seen this side of Imogen, someone that is deeply hurt by her mother leaving and someone that would use her mother just for money, but doesn't even want to have a relationship with her. This is a flaw with Imogen that creates intrigue for her character to me.
Well, Natalie, there's a lot of things you don't know about me, and I'd like to keep it that way.
However, this is probably the most depth that she actually gets as a character. We see how much she worries about her father's health, how she's willing to sacrifice her school life to take care of him.
I'm upstairs marking papers, Natalie. Please don't interrupt.
This exchange with her father always stuck with me. You can really see how the reality has set in that her father has dementia.
Have you seen Volta's leash?
Dad Volta's dead, remember? Dad?
Yeah.
And we also see that Imogen doesn't want to ask anyone for help. This level of emotional depth for Imogen is never really seen again in the show. Maybe I give the show some more leeway than I should, but I found Imogen's relationship with her mother interesting. I think it was an example of showing a flawed parent that we can also sympathize with.
Fish pie didn't work. He thought I was you today. How do we stop it from getting worse?
All we can do is be there for him.
I'm so scared. I'm here for you. He killed Volta and he didn't remember it.
Her mother and father obviously drifted apart, and at the time Imogen only saw it as her mother leaving her and her father, and not everything that came with that.
Eventually move into a home.
He doesn't need a home, he has me.
You have school. Next year you'll be in college.
See, this is where you and I differ. Just because you abandoned Dad doesn't mean I will.
I think it would have been interesting if Imogen's father was focused on more, because I also found him to be sympathetic for someone that doesn't fully understand what is happening to his brain. And the guy just seems like he genuinely cares for his daughter. Imagine if season 13 focused more on her relationship with her mother, and maybe showing more of the decline of her father's mental state. There would definitely be some interesting interactions between Imogen and her mother, who are trying to reconnect and see how Imogen is emotionally dealing with it. Maybe she eventually introduces Jack to her mother and talks to Jack about her father and how she's feeling about it. There were a lot of possibilities that Degrassi could have taken to follow up on this storyline, because it really felt like it added some emotional depth to Imogen's character, and I think if they were consistent with that emotional depth, that Imogen's character would have left more of a positive impression. I know that I've already talked about Winston and how he was done dirty by the show, but I'm going to talk about him again because he deserved more, especially dropping a line like this.
Why are you calling Mr. Yates a creepo?
Cause he tried to grope me.
Did the writers just actually establish that one of the other characters was assaulted by a teacher, and they treat it as a passing comment? It's interesting that Tristan being taken advantage of by his teacher was focused on and taken seriously, but Winston doesn't get any focus on something that was probably traumatic for him. This is also something that is never brought up again. The fact that Yates seemed to be a serial predator is something that is just kind of glossed over. The reason why Winston brought up Yates in the first place was to advance Tristan's plot by revealing what happened with Tristan to Miles. They didn't even deliver the information for Winston's sake. It was literally just for Tristan. I just think of how much this was better handled with Lucy in Degrassi Junior High. It felt like Lucy's feelings were focused on and how she was genuinely traumatized by it. I'm not saying that plotline was perfect either, but it felt more authentic than just another dramatic plot point for the show. It felt like they were trying to take the story seriously. We could have had a storyline where Winston is bothered by what Yates did to him and he has a hard time opening up to Miles or his parents about it. This could have been one of those moments to also start establishing Winston and his relationship to his parents. Maybe he's afraid of what his parents will think of him. Imagine if this was a multi-episode arc throughout season 13 where Winston sees what Yates is doing but is deathly afraid to come forward, showing Winston struggling to deal with it more over time. For boys who experience this, it can be hard to talk about to anyone, let alone their friends. Maybe he could also be afraid of what Miles would say. One of his parents could maybe have been established to be harder to talk to, and he would be afraid of not being believed. Winston was never taken seriously as a character, aside from being used as a character to help develop another character's storyline, or just a character to deliver more needed information to the audience. But that doesn't mean that there weren't any chances for him to become a more interesting character over time. The writers just never really gave him the chance to be developed or to leave a strong impression. When Katie was introduced, she wasn't particularly liked by fans, but she definitely grew on me over time. However, there was always something I wondered, and maybe the writers forgot about it, but why did they never focus on Katie's struggle with addiction or her eating disorder? We learned during season 11 that Katie struggled with an eating disorder.
I assumed you told you about your urge to purge. Katie's bulimic. That's not true. You shouldn't be ashamed. Lots of girls have eating disorders.
No one would ever believe that you have an eating disorder.
Because that would be pathetic.
Instead of it feeling like it was taken seriously, it just feels like it was put there so Marisol would have something to blackmail Katie with. I don't think eating disorder plotlines can really be handled in one episode, and this has always been a shortcoming of Degrassi whenever they do handle these types of storylines. Some I think were handled better, but for me, this needs to be depicted as an ongoing struggle and not just a plot point for an episode, and that's where Katie's struggle with bulimia is really downplayed. What if Marisol actually triggered Katie's eating disorder again?
Oh my god, did you just
Like you care. I'm gonna lose it all. The boy, the election.
cross the line? Okay,
I hate you.
you don't mean that.
Horrible person. I can't believe we were ever friends. Katie, you're dead to me.
And this led to Katie avoiding Marisol. We'd also get to see Katie struggle for a continuous amount of time that actually allows us to feel the weight more when the other characters find out that she's making herself throw up. I think it would have also given us a chance to show some serious self-reflection on Marisol's end for what happened, possibly noticing the same signs like before. If they were still avoiding each other, Marisol would also feel conflicted on how to approach the situation. I think it would have added more depth than just having Marisol use this secret between them as leverage because she wants Drew. She does remember the last time she tried going on a date with him, right?
I'm gonna get a tuna wrap with a scoop of strawberry ice cream on top.
I'll get the same. Easier if I don't have to think for myself.
There are multiple times for Katie to have interesting storylines, especially an ongoing struggle with addiction. Imagine if this worry came up again while she was dating Jake, especially when she finds out that he's smoking weed. Not that weed would lead to her doing harder drugs, but it would have been interesting to see her reaction to it, and maybe she does have a hard time opening up to Jake about this because she's worried about what he'll think. This could also be the case for opening up about her eating disorder. During season 7, Paige starts dating her roommate named Griffin. During this time, it's established that he has HIV and that he didn't tell Paige before they had sex, so she's afraid that she contracted it.
If he used a condom...
He still took a risk, Marco. He took a risk with my life.
I meant to tell you. The time just never seemed right.
Well, it doesn't matter because now I have to suffer your stupid choices in lifestyle.
Lifestyle? You just assume it's my lifestyle?
Well, isn't it?
And the results of the test will take months to come back. The conflict I thought was interesting because it reveals a little bit more about Griffin as a character. We hadn't really gotten much on him during the entire season.
What is this?
My mother's obituary. She was a junkie. Tried to stop after I was born, but couldn't. I never even met her. I've been in a healthy sexuality program for years. They teach you how to have these conversations, but it doesn't make it any easier.
I am not wrong to be scared.
I know. Neither am I.
So focusing on something like this created an interesting conflict in their relationship. You do understand Griffin's perspective and why he didn't tell Paige, although it was something that he shouldn't have done.
Things were going so well, I didn't want to ruin it. You'd be surprised how quickly the truth makes people run away.
Well, so do lies.
The HIV makes everything complicated.
You weren't honest with me. You didn't let me choose. But I'm not mad you have HIV.
You know, some days I forget that I have it. I mean, I've never even been sick.
The problem for me is that the episode ends very ambiguously. It's also just never brought up again. We don't really know the current status of her relationship with Griffin. It's implied at the end of the episode that they'll work it out.
Let's be honest, it's gonna be weird either way. But I want to try to work through this. This is nothing. Wait till you get to know me.
I guess we're to assume that she never got it because after season 7, it's never brought up again. It would have been interesting if they established a conflict like this earlier in the season, so we could maybe have focused on Paige worrying about whether she has it and show us more of the serious effects of the relationship. I know it might not be a favorable choice, but imagine if the writers had Paige contract HIV. That could have been an interesting plot line, but that isn't the only thing that doesn't really feel fully addressed by the end. I feel like Paige's bisexuality was brushed aside and never really taken as seriously. It was to an extent, but aside from dating Alex, we don't really see Paige conflicted with liking girls or if she likes guys more. That could have been something to explore with Paige's character because it seemed like something she was somewhat worried about before.
You're cool with being a lesbian, but I don't know what I am.
The word is bisexual, Paige, and it's just a label.
I do not like girls. I cannot like girls.
I know it doesn't have to be a main focus focus, but for a character that is exploring their sexuality, I just wish we got to see Paige's journey with that more. The college years especially didn't have enough time to flesh out their storylines for these characters, so that's why I think Ellie, Margot, and Paige's plot lines aren't as interesting, especially in season 7. I also feel like we never really got to see much of Darcy's recovery period. We saw her befriending Jane, and that was interesting for her character because she had gone through a lot throughout her time on the show, and I kind of feel like toward the end of season 7 and the beginning of season 8, we were just starting to see a more mature version of Darcy, but we never really got to get storylines post everything that happened because her actress left the show, so they had to write her out. Even though it is implied that Darcy is in a better place mentally, it does feel very sudden that she's going to Africa. I guess we are to assume that things went well for Darcy after she went to Kenya, but we never really got too much follow-up even from Claire or their parents in the following seasons about what she'd gotten up to. Is there a distance between them? It would have been interesting to get a follow-up to Darcy. When we saw Katie again, at least we got the impression that she was doing well at school. With Darcy, we don't really get any updates, and I know that Darcy isn't the most loved character on the show, but I do think for what they set up, having her confused with her identity as a Christian girl, then being stalked by a creep that was following her on the internet, and then being taken advantage of at a party while she was blacked out. For a girl like Darcy, it makes sense that she would want to explore who she is outside of her religion, and she also wants to feel mature and adult, since her parents probably sheltered her and Claire to a degree. After experiencing one of the worst acts imaginable, Darcy struggles to cope with it, and then as season 7 goes on, she finally does face what she experienced. From this point, we saw that she was in counseling, and she was clearly working through her trauma with her family. Still, Darcy not being present at certain points on the show feels out of character for her. Why wouldn't Darcy come to visit Claire at least once during treatment? Wouldn't she show up for her mother getting married? Apparently there was a deleted scene where she sent her mother a gift, but it was cut out, so there was an attempt to keep Darcy's presence alive in some form, but after a while they just stopped trying, like she didn't even exist. I guess we could assume that Darcy could have visited off screen, but that's no fun, especially when a character was on the show for a certain amount of time, and she and Claire, from what we saw, were really close, so her not being there feels strange. Another weird thing is not seeing Claire's father at all, not even once. The last time we see him is during season 11, when she wanted to move in with him briefly, and it was established that they clearly had a distant relationship. Honestly, that could have been something that was focused on for Claire too, like her feeling disheartened that her father doesn't show up at all for her treatment, but to not acknowledge her father at all when we know that she had somewhat of a relationship with him, it's kind of weird. It just makes these plot lines where these characters are going through a life-threatening condition or illness or some other event, and certain family members that would probably at least get mentioned or would have been there aren't seen. It just makes those characters look bad when you think about it. Like, where was Owen when his brother was in a coma? Where was Claire's father and sister when she was going through chemo? I'll even include Jake in this because we could have at least saw him visiting once or something. It's not the biggest problem ever, but I think it would have also been nice to see Claire and Darcy reconnect and see that Darcy is in a better place. Unfortunately, that just never got to happen. This last one isn't one thing specifically, but a factor to the show that gets disregarded over time that I think was integral to what made Degrassi interesting in the early seasons. I think that Degrassi not focusing on the adults as much took a level of nuance out of the show. I understand that the position they were in, they probably felt like there was nothing more they could do with the adults angle, but I think there could have been a way to incorporate some adults into the show that were related to the students in interesting ways. There was a certain appeal to the earlier seasons when they focused to a degree, or at least included the adults in the conflicts with the teens at certain points. I know that the focus on the adults in the earlier seasons was mainly because they were including the cast from Degrassi High and following them as adults. However, I think the next generation strikes a good balance with giving you enough information to fill you in, even if you haven't watched Degrassi High. The way they were able to include them, and you didn't feel like you were missing out on anything, and you could still feel invested in their conflicts as well, is interesting. There were moments where you got some emotional exploration with the adults, and I think it added to the depth of the show, allowing the show to feel more natural and grounded, seeing adults that were consistently involved in the teens' lives, and even allowing them to have some depth that makes you feel the show a little bit more. Like this moment where Joey yells at Craig when he finds out that Craig was going to take Angela with him.
Stay away from Angie, okay? Like your dad said. Yeah, Joey, I can't do that. I mean it!
If we didn't already have some familiarity with Joey and his relationship to the others on the show, the weight wouldn't be felt as much. In the later era of the show, we do see adults, but their involvement is very minimal and they don't focus on the parents' perspective because the adults from the modern era of Degrassi don't have that connection to a previous series, and the show doesn't do much to have the adults or parents have more of an impression on the audience. I think the closest it gets in the modern era of Degrassi is Maya's relationship with her mother, because we do see how her mother struggles to help Maya with her depression, and at times you do sympathize with her character because she has been on the show consistently for the most part. But even with Maya's mom, it still feels shallow compared to how they focused on the adults in the past. I liked when they focused on characters like Joey and Simpson. I think that's why a lot of people thought the characters were interesting and added something to the show, like Joey being a support and father to Craig. That gives more depth. Simpson and Emma grow to see each other as father and daughter, when Emma didn't even like Simpson in the beginning, and eventually it gets to a point where she calls him dad.
Emma, sit!
You don't talk to me like that. You're not my dad.
Because I have to be like this, Emma, if I'm gonna beat it.
And are you?
Yes. I promise you, Jack, and your mom. Yes.
Did you get to the party and want to act like a teenager again? Just give me a reason, Dad, please.
Thanks for staying with me.
I believe in you, Dad. Don't make me regret it.
When you see how much Simpson cares for Sean like his own kid, that's when the show feels emotionally heartfelt. I think that once the show started phasing out the adults and their relationships to the students is when it felt more like a teen drama than ever before. Maybe I'm in the minority, and it could have been that most people weren't interested in the adult angle of the show anymore, but for me, I think it added a level of interest. So those were some more missed opportunities that Degrassi could have taken to expand on existing storylines or aspects of the character that never got explored. Let me know how you guys feel about some of these. I'd love to hear some of the missed opportunities that you noticed while watching the show. Well, that's all I got. I'll see you in the next one.